welcome back to an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Nick Farabaugh. We told you guys already. No Alan Saunders the rest of the week, so Nick joining me again today. Nick, how we doing, pal?
Yeah, we're doing good. It's we're entering a little dead period here before rookie mini camp, so not a ton to
Absolutely.
talk about. Nothing is there's still no significant playmaker that has
Still
come
waiting on that
to,
significant
to the Steelers.
playmaker.
So
Yep.
you're still waiting on that. No traction on anything. So we're gonna uh we're gonna sauce it up a little bit here, I guess. Kind of like a mailbaggy episode, right?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I know people always put out for mailbags. I always just say give us some questions or topics on X and see what people can give us. But we actually had some left over from yesterday that we weren't able to get to, or people, I can't blame them for not checking the timestamp. But like there were still questions coming in today from yesterday's episode, so we'll get to as many as we can today, Nick. And I think that we should just dive right into it because, as you said, not much news being provided to us by the Steelers. Still waiting on that significant playmaker, BMAC. But until then, let's get to some questions. And this one I think is really interesting. My guy, the Facts Mob, says, "How do we protect ourselves if Russ has a great year and we don't get to see Fields at all? Would we re-sign the older Russ if he's still playing good and bet on the youthful upside of Fields without seeing him all year? Would feel terrible letting either go and still needing a QB." That's interesting. We've talked a lot about, all the quarterbacks. And I mean, obviously, you're not including Kyle Allen as a guy as like a future piece here. The entire quarterback room is on a 1-year deal. Like right now, nothing in 2025 is set in stone in terms of the quarterback room. So what is your approach here, Nick? What's your thought?
I think it's whoever plays the best got to play. I think that's what they're going to do. Fields is interesting because there is upside there, but also we've seen the same issues for his entire tenure in Chicago. So, could a better offensive line provide something new with him? I think that's the intriguing
Mhm.
thing. So, if you don't see any of Justin Fields this year, I mean, that's a tough spot to be in, right? Like, what if Russ
Yeah.
looks like he did last year, which was okay? Like, the stat sheet was good for Russ, but you watch the tape and there's he's a solid game manager. Like, that's what Russ is. I think it's tough, right? Because you're going to want to win games. You're going to want to win playoff games this year, if you can. So, really, what I would do is, if Russ starts to really fall off a cliff, I think you got to start to see what you have in Justin Fields because he does have future benefit. I personally would like to see Justin Fields back next year, in some capacity. And hey, maybe this is, there's been rumors and talks about do they extend Justin Fields this summer? I don't think they will. But maybe you do that as a security blanket. But really, I mean, listen, if Russ is playing great, Russ is playing great. Like that's cool, right? If Russ is playing phenomenal, then don't worry about it. Really, if he's just being like okay, I think at some point you probably are turning it over to Justin Fields just because I imagine that okay play will eventually taper. So it's kind of an
Mhm.
odd spot. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, for the future, it's not a great spot to be in because it's like a patchwork 1-year deal for everything. So you wouldn't have if Russ is okay, and you're probably letting Russ walk. I'm assuming because I mean he's not taking another vet minimum contract, and I don't think you're paying 25 million for just okay, 30 million for just okay, and I don't know what Justin Fields' market would be in that case. I mean, what do you think he would cost? Like he would,
I
I mean, that could be anything, and I'm sure there would be teams that would want to give Justin Fields a shot still after that. So, like, dude, I have no idea what his market would be in that case. And the Steelers would have no idea if he was even good at that point.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, turning the 5th-year option down, that's a no-brainer. You're not gonna
Yeah,
pay him
100%.
$25 million without seeing him take a snap for next season. But I do think it's interesting to, like, be open to and approach him about an extension, at least for, one maybe you make it like a Jordan Love type situation, right? Like, when he was going into, last year, like, very incentive-based contract, like, we're paying you as a starting quarterback, like a baseline starting quarterback, but there's a ton of, like, incentives and escalators that can get you a lot more money on this deal. So I think that would be an interesting way to approach it, because Fields would have the opportunity to earn a lot more money in 2025 if he does end up being the starting quarterback on this roster. I guess what really throws a wrench into it this year for me is obviously Russ being on the roster and the draft compensation potentially changing depending on Justin's playing time. I mean, I don't know if that's going to factor in their decision going from a sixth to a fourth if he plays over 50% of the snaps. Like if Russ isn't playing good enough and you have to turn to Justin as the number one starter, he plays over 50% of the snaps, and that's the reason that you end up being in a better position because of it, then I don't think you're, complaining about giving up a fourth round as opposed to a sixth round if you end up finding a solution and Justin Fields does become your quarterback. But yeah, like if it doesn't work out, say he does play over 51% of the snaps, doesn't look good, like Russ gets hurt, Justin plays a bunch of snaps, doesn't look good, you're giving up a higher draft pick and you still don't have an answer at quarterback. Like there is a way that this thing could go south.
For sure. Listen, both these quarterbacks are, from what we know at this point, not very good. It's just that, like, that's the cold, honest truth. Like at this point, to where they are, where Russ is this late point in his career, where Fields has been to this point in his career, they're very much in that middle tier, and they aren't, elite players right now, and they're not the long term answer. It is really what it boils down to. So they're going to try and find that. Maybe Russ finds his magic again. I still think a lot of that was tied to his athleticism in Seattle. And he's lost a little bit of it. Not that he's not so athletic, but he's not that athletic. Fields is going to be fascinating. I don't so much talent for Justin Fields, but some of his pocket management issues are just really, really bad, and he turns into a negative play machine. So we'll kind of see where it goes. But yeah, this year, I think they'll get better quarterback play than they got last year. But I think for making a long-term decision, it's a really hard kind of stretch to say at this point that either of these two are your long-term answers.
Yeah, I mean, last year Russ's metrics, like 18th, was probably as high as he graded out in any, and that's including like QBR, EPA per play, those types of metrics. Also, this was from the Facts Mob, and I thought it was interesting. We keep talking about making Dan Moore a swing tackle. How can he be that if he's not playing comfortable on the right side? How can such a limited one-way player hold a roster spot? Thoughts?
Well, he's not going to be your swing tackle. I think he will be your top backup tackle, but he's going to be probably left exclusive, which is odd, but he's an experienced tackle, and the Steelers are going to value that experience. Just
that's what I say. Like, how common is it to have your number 3 not be able to play on both sides?
It's kind of weird because is he like a game day inactive? I don't know. Probably the other interior guy that is not the top interior swingman is actually the game day inactive. So he'll probably be active. It's not as long as you it's not very common, but as long as you have another guy there that you trust, I think they can do it. And Dylan Cook can play 4 spots and Spencer Anderson can play 5. So if you trust Anderson or Cook to be the 4th, theoretically you dress 7. So all 4 tackles would just be dressed at that point. So really, I look at where they would be at with Moore, and he's really good injury insurance. If one of the young guys don't step up, he's also going to be their 3rd best tackle by far on the team. So if Broderick or Troy Fautanu got hurt, he can at least step in and spot start. So yeah, that would maybe like if Fautanu was playing right tackle and got hurt, that would force probably Broderick to move to right. Which if
I was like, despite him being uncomfortable there, should that be an emphasis from this point until the season starts to like try to get Dan somewhat acclimated on the right side, or are we?
You got to try it. I feel like, right? Like you got to see what he looks like in camp. He looked awful last year there when he was at right tackle, but they even threw him in game and he didn't look good there. But I think they at least have to try it, right? I don't think you can't not try it to see if Bam Moore can at least do it. But as we stand here right now, he's exclusively on the left, and both the tackles that they have starting have experience going both places. So that's probably what would happen. If Broderick got hurt, Dan Moore would just slot in at left, But if Troy Fatanu got hurt, or if Broderick stays at right, for example, and Fatanu's the left, well, then Fatanu would probably slip over to right. So it's a very odd situation. He's not a true swing tackle, but he is an experienced tackle that has 3 seasons worth of starting experience, and the Steelers are going to value that. So that's why he'll make the team. And your swing tackle is essentially going to be whichever tackle doesn't get hurt, I guess, right? Or depending on
Yeah.
who's playing right, I guess who's playing left tackle would be the swing tackle.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's good stuff. We go to this is interesting from John. How concerned are we about the age/depth of the defensive line?
For like a long term need, I mean, it's a massive need, right? And
Yeah.
if I told you right now, a year from now, the Steelers would be picking a defensive lineman in the first round, I don't think anyone would be surprised.
No. I'll
Um,
be honest, I almost so they in theory, you hope that it works out. They finished building the offensive line. I almost expect them to now turn their attention to the other side of the trenches next year in the draft.
yeah, depends on quarterback. If they need a
That's
quarterback,
that's fair. That is fair. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on a ton of things. Right now, like guard might be a need. Um, Corner is probably going to be a need.
Yeah.
Receiver, like there's so many directions, but we have no idea, you know, what twists and turns this season could take, who will emerge, etc. But D-line does look like a big need, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
don't think there's any two ways about it. I think they've drafted a defensive lineman in 6 straight drafts. To be quite honest, with the depth that they have, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. Um, is the depth awful? No. Is it like great? No, it's pretty average. Um, I think it was better last year. Monty Adams is back, so the nose tackle depth is good. I think Benton and Adams is a good 1-2 in the nose. Um, Lowry will back you up at the 5 and down. And then it's really going to be a combination of Fahoko, Loudermilk, Liao, Lee. Um, Again, those names to me don't inspire a ton of confidence. I did think Loudermilk was better down the stretch as a run stopper,
Mm,
but not a lot of pass rush juice in that group. Um,
sure.
Liao has not had a good stint here, really, because they haven't found a spot for him. I didn't
Mm,
love Lee's tape coming out of Iowa, but let's see what he can provide. And Fahoko is another big plugging nose tackle. So maybe if Fahoko, really shows out and they like Monte Travius Adams more down the line because he can move up and down the line, maybe that's something we could see this year. Cam Hayward's older. There's no doubt about that. I don't really know what they're going to get out of Cam Hayward this year because we didn't see Cam Hayward at all last year not hurt. I mean, even when he came back, he wasn't a good pass rusher, really, but he was a phenomenal run defender. But he was playing on one leg virtually because he had to get a pro season surgery on that groin again. So he came back early, fought through it. I mean, I don't know. Ogunjobi was very average last year, maybe even below average. So the group has been better. I'll say that, right? But it just felt like they had more that urgent needs that they needed to fill, and D line kind of got squashed down a little bit this
mhm.
offseason. I think Benton has a chance to be a star this year, a real breakout star, but
Right.
um,
Yeah, he's the one long-term piece, right? Like, you
right,
feel like he kinda needs the running mate along that defensive line that's just not there right now.
yeah, I agree. So am I like super concerned about it? I wouldn't say I'm concerned about it, but is there a way this thing turns out to be very, very bad? Yes. If Cam Hayward, like, could they withstand Cam Hayward missing 8 weeks again this year?
Mm.
That's a tough proposition. I think I do think losing Armand Watts was a real blow to that group.
I would agree, and I think it kinda flew under the radar. We'll see what the likes of Dean Lowry will provide to this roster. This is an interesting question from Hayden too. If Broderick Jones was in this draft class, where would you rank him amongst the offensive tackles?
That's interesting. He was raw coming out, so he was
Mhm.
kind of like probably below the top guys. Like I'd probably put him below Fautanu, Probably like where like Amarius Mims is, somewhere around
Okay.
there. I know Mims went before Fautano, but to me, Fautano was better. And
Yeah,
I
I
liked
agree.
Amarius Mims. I don't think he was quite as raw coming out as Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton is just such a project, even though he's got real upside. So I would put him over Guyton. And then I think, you know, the inexperience and injury history of Mims versus the phenomenal tape. And then Broderick just has this upside. I would put him somewhere around there. So like I don't know, OT6 or something like that. Like
Yeah.
this was just an
I mean,
extraordinarily deep tackle class. Like at the top, it was
yeah.
such a deep tackle class. So, Broderick probably would have been there at 20 this year, theoretically, which is crazy because last year there were only, what, like 4 or 5 of them? I mean, Broderick was the last of them before Anton Harrison, who was down the board a little bit further.
I liked Anton Harris. I was gonna say Anton Harrison was actually my number 2 last year, just behind Paris. So, like, looking at combining the 2, I would have had Alt, probably Fashanu, Fatanu, Paris, Harrison, Jones.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
Darnell
those are
Wright.
mine.
Um,
Yeah, I wasn't as high in Darnell, but I mean,
yeah,
he was good. Yeah, I mean,
Darnell
he
Wright had
definitely
a
proved me
pretty
wrong.
solid first year.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could consider Skoronski in there. I know he played guard his first year, but
Yeah, I didn't rank him as a tackle though. Because I was looking at my tackle rankings from the last 2 years, trying to figure out where to have him ranked. I didn't have Skoronski as a tackle, so
yeah, but
but yeah.
I definitely think this tackle group was better. At the top is deeper. So I really would have looked at, a guy like Broderick Jones as still a first round pick. He probably just would have fallen down a little bit more just because you have, all those guys at the top. You talked about Alt, Fashanu, Fatanu, Fuaga, Mims. I mean, it was an absurd group up top.
Mhm. This question kind of goes into we had a question yesterday about playing rookies and concern for doing so. SBA says, will offensive line gel from week 1? Pat Meyer's desired technique takes time to learn, even from experienced players like Daniels, as we've seen. They'll have 2 rookies, one potentially playing a new position. OL has taken too long into the season to gel in the past few years. Concerned.
Yeah, listen, it's not just a concern about the OL, it's a concern about the whole offense. Look at how many new
Mhm.
pieces they have. All the quarterbacks are new. There's a new
Yeah.
OC. There's a young wide receiver. The whole wide receiver group's basically new outside of Pickens and Austin.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about the 2 rookies on the O line. It's a new group, like just across the board. So is the O line part of that? Yeah. But I think there's also going to be growing pains from the quarterbacks. There's going to be growing pains from the receivers. There's going to be growing pains from Arthur Smith. I mean, all of these
Yeah.
new guys, man, are just it's a real kind of different group. So yeah, there's some concern there. Do I think it's going to be so detrimental? The O line specifically, I don't think so. Um, and I really think Fautanu is very similar to what Pat Meyer likes to do. Um, Kind of an aggressive guy that punches with the inside hand. So very similar to what he does philosophically. Frazier, I think, will have a little bit of learning curve, but Sayamalo even struggled last year, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably going to happen. So is it a concern? Yeah. But I'm just concerned in general about the offense early in the year because when you have this many moving parts that are new, even if they're veterans, it usually spells growing pains pretty early in the year. So I do not expect the offense at this point. We'll see how they look in camp and preseason and everything, but don't really expect the offense to get off to a raring start.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking about them being slow out of the gate, at least yet. That just hasn't really set in, but you're absolutely right for all the reasons that you said. Um, so yeah, but to your point yesterday, I mean, they're going to be your best 5 though, and they're going to have to take those lumps early to be better for it down the line. So still absolutely on board with them being the guys out of the gate. You mentioned the receivers being different. That's interesting. We can go right into this question then, because Matt said Jefferson, Watkins better or worse than Robinson and Boykins.
Interesting question.
Also Boykin. I shouldn't. I was just reading exactly like he typed it, but his mom's
It's
Boykin.
Van Jefferson, you know, is probably better than both of them. Quez Watkins is, eh. offers some special teams versatility. Boykin definitely makes up for the special teams versatility part of it. There's not a ton
Mhm.
of special teams versatility among Jefferson and Watkins. There's some return ability with Watkins. Um, Van Jefferson, is at least a decent route runner. Um, Pretty tough-minded guy, blocks well, has good hands. I mean, pretty similar player, honestly, to what Allen Robinson was, but probably a bit of a better separator. So I'd probably say, Van Jefferson's probably. I would probably, if it's like Jefferson Austin, I think I'd take those two because I think
Okay.
Watkins. I've said this
Yeah.
before on here. I don't really expect Watkins to make the team. So
I
I
think
think
they
Austin.
included the names that they've brought in and the names that had left, but you're absolutely
Yeah,
right. Like Calvin Austin could be higher on the pecking order.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I know what the question is asking, specifically the players they brought in, players that left. I mean, it's really not great versus not great, but I think I'd probably take Jefferson and Watkins
Also,
slightly.
though, couldn't you, if we were tweeting this question, couldn't you have included Roman Wilson as the addition and Deontay
Yeah,
Johnson as the subtraction?
I mean,
And then
yeah, oh, yeah. If you add Deontay to that, I think I take them. I take the old group just because I think Deontay is clearly better. But if it's Roman Wilson, Roman Wilson is probably the Allen Robinson replacement, truly because of he's a slot guy. He's a really tough blocker. You'll just see it move differently, and kind of how they use him. We talked about that yesterday and how condensed formations, the 12 personnel, the motions, the crossers, all that stuff is probably how they're
Mhm.
going to use
Some
him.
people that listen to this show or watch the show get upset when we use terms like that, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes. So all of that stuff. Roman Wilson's probably the more direct Allen Robinson replacement. I know a lot of
Mhm.
people have been talking about him as the Deontay Johnson replacement, but I think he's probably more the Allen Robinson replacement. Um, Assuming they had someone else, of course. But if we're doing Watkins and Jefferson versus Robinson and Boykin, I'd probably take Watkins and Jefferson.
Yeah, mainly because of Van Jefferson.
Mhm.
Mikey says, "Are the Steelers being slept on?" By that I mean they are consistently being picked the third or fourth in the division. If not, what would make them contenders if either Russ or Justin ball out? What are your thoughts there?
I don't think they're being slept on. I think they're being rightfully rated. I do think 65% chance to miss the playoffs is a little high. That was Bet Online that did that
Mhm.
earlier this week. I think that is sleeping on them. But the third in the division, is anyone going to be surprised if they finish behind two of the Browns, Bengals, or Baltimore? I'm not. I really look at it, and the Steelers have definitely closed the talent gap. I think they came into the offseason with the fourth most talented roster. And that is significantly closed with additions of guys like Patrick Queen, the quarterback upgrades. I think Deshaun Elliott's better than a lot of people are giving him credit for. They upgraded corner. They upgraded the O line, so they upgraded the roster. And they will. I think we are assuming that a slot corner and a receiver are coming still. So overall, this roster
Mhm.
is going to be pretty solid. So I would slot them in at third in the division right now, just because it's a tough division. I think it's the hardest division in football. I think there's four talented teams in this division, and the Steelers right now, by some strength of schedule measures, have the hardest schedule in the entire NFL. It's a really hard schedule
Yeah.
next year for the Steelers, man. And that's not even just bringing in the AFC North opponents. You look outside, they face a lot of really good teams.
Kansas City
Um,
comes here.
yep, Cowboys, with Dak and them.
Obviously, the Eagles.
Yep, the Eagles is another one. It's not an easy schedule. It's going to be a tough schedule for them. So I honestly look at the tough schedule paired with the division they're in. You know, they went 10-7 last year. I could see them going 10-7 again this year. I would personally predict them to go right now like 10-7 wild card playoff round. That's kind of where I think they are. I think most analysts probably see them around the same area. Um,
Yeah.
9-10 wins, wild card berth. So
Right.
I think that's about right now. Because they still have questions like the wide receiver room still a question. We don't know how that's going to look, who they add. Arthur Smith is still a question. The quarterbacks are still a question. How these O linemen gel is a question. The secondary is a question. Like, the team has questions still, probably more questions than most of the other teams in the division, really, outside of the Browns right now, who have a fair bit of questions themselves. But right now, I mean, the Steelers finishing third, I don't really think they're going to finish last. I can't
I'm
see that.
never gonna pick them to finish last
Yeah,
until they do
I
it. They
agree.
just don't do it.
I
Like,
agree.
until I see it happen, I'm never gonna pick them to do it.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
do think, along with you though, like that's the range that they should be in. Like, even if they've made upgrades on their roster, so has everybody else.
yep,
Like, how many teams are worse than they were on paper right now than they were in 2023? Not many. Like, even
yeah,
look in the AFC, the Jets obviously getting Aaron Rodgers back. They should be a better football team than they were. And obviously that defense was already in place. The Bengals are getting Joe Burrow back. I honestly, like, I have trouble talking about the Browns made the playoffs last year despite everything that happened at quarterback. Is Deshaun Watson ever going to be a top half of the league quarterback again? I don't know. I think that we're so far removed from that it's like I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's hard for me to. I'm not going to predict it to happen. But still a very, very talented roster outside of the quarterback position. There's so many good teams in the AFC. The AFC South, like the Jaguars were in first place up until Trevor Lawrence got hurt. They should be back in the mix, in my opinion, this year. Titans just spent a bunch of money. Like, I have no clue how the AFC is going to play out. I do think the Steelers are still going to be in that conversation to make the playoffs. But to me, they're one of the teams that are kind of like on the bubble right now, whether they will be in or out in terms of a wild card.
yeah. I mean, listen, I talked about their schedule. We're talking about obviously the divisional games, the Cowboys, the Chiefs. Um, you know, road games, they're going to go to Philly. The Colts should be a really good team this year too, by what it looks like. So it's a tough group. But the Steelers definitely feel like a team that's going to make the playoffs, but there's going to be growing pains with this team. There's just so much new, right? So much new on this team that even teams that are good, that have a lot of new, typically don't start out super strong. Like, it usually doesn't happen. Like, even last year, and it's a little different, obviously, because he was a rookie and everything. But the Texans had so much new with Stroud,
Yeah.
Ryans, and bringing in a ton of guys, and they didn't really get rolling until about week 5 or 6, and really starting to push for the playoffs. So it's probably just going to take a little bit, I think, for the Steelers to kind of get going. So I think I don't think people are sleeping on them. I think probably there is some disrespect just because it always seems like there is. And the quarterback situation, Arthur Smith is going to bring that. But third, like, if they finished third in the division, went 10-7, and made the playoffs, I don't think that would be unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't spent any time, I feel like, talking about this guy. Matt Aussie Steeler 91 at Matt Pev asked, is Connor Heyward's spot at risk in the Arthur Smith offense? A guy that we haven't talked about a lot. Obviously, they've added another tight end, Michael Pruitt, to this offense. But what are your thoughts on Connor Heyward's role, if there is one?
Could be the fullback, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I fully expected them to like go and sign Keith Smith or like get another fullback, and they haven't, at least yet. So
No, I don't really, they don't really need one. But he can be that. He does offer them a little bit more flexibility, specifically on special teams, than the other guys do, because he's an elite special teamer. So do I really think he's at risk without, like, the special teams units, man, need help because that's a lot of turnover on that group this year for them. So I expect him to kind of make the team on that merit. But I don't know, maybe Michael Pruitt, is a really good blocker. Maybe he kind of has a good camp, and Rodney Williams has a great camp, and Heyward doesn't. Maybe
yeah,
that's where that could happen. Can't
Hot
forget
Rod.
you can't forget about Hot Rod.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think Connor Hayward's going to be fine. Is he going to have some like huge role in the offense? I don't think so. But Arthur Smith loves having 4 tight ends on the roster. I expect him to be one of those 4.
Yeah, there we go. That's fair. Another name that we haven't talked about a ton, but with the Steelers cornerback room looking the way it is, I think this is a good one. Jim says, what role do you think the Pittsburgh utilizes for Darius Rush in the secondary? Do you think he has an outside shot at being a starter at some point this year?
I mean, maybe if he comes along quickly. He was definitely the rawest of the young guys last year. He is
Mhm.
pure upside, man. Obviously, the great speed, the length is all there, and I like the fact that they started kind of teasing the versatility with him last year when he played linebacker and slot.
Yeah, what was it? That was the Titans game, right? That Thursday
Yeah,
night game where he was just like everywhere,
I
and then
wonder
like we
if
didn't
I
see much
wonder
of
if
him
they're
again.
gonna use him like that again. If they do, I think it could be interesting because he could be a real sub package piece that actually
Mhm.
plays this year. So I'm interested in that. It really depends though on how fast he comes along, where Corey Trice is, because if Trice is above him on the depth chart, I mean Trice is gonna get the first crack outside if say Dante Jackson or JPJ went down.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, man. I'm cautiously optimistic about both those guys, Rush and Trace. Trace was having an awesome summer before he
Yeah.
went down, and I thought Rush had some really promising moments. I thought the Titans game showed some promise. I think he really needs to learn special teams duties. I think that's really where he can cut his teeth. Do I think he's gonna have an outside chance to be a starter? I can't rule it out. If you're talking about an outside chance, I mean, I don't think you're talking about like an 80% chance here. I think you're talking, 10%. Like, can I
Mhm.
rule that out? No, because Darius Rush made, serious strides with his athleticism. I mean, he could look really good this summer. So I'm interested to see kind of how they use him, one and two, where he slots in with his year two development.
Absolutely. All right, great stuff, Nick. A lot of bases covered. Thank you to everybody that sent in some questions. We might have to do this again during the week if we don't get
Yeah.
some Steelers news on that front. But tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter, X at Farabaugh FB. Make sure to read the stuff at SteelersNow.com, of course. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn the notification bell here on the Steelers Now YouTube channel.
There we go. As Nick said, like, subscribe, notification bell, hit us in the comments with questions as well, and we will include them in with our X questions. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you were listening somewhere else, whether that is Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the afternoon drive there as well. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH, for Nick Farabaugh and myself. Thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers afternoon drive.